Vivid verses.
The dossier sat on the obsidian kitchen island, its edges perfectly parallel to the seam of the marble. It was bound in heavy, cream-colored cardstock with the crest of the sterling foundation embossed in silver. Next to it sat a single, cold cup of espresso, the crema having long since dissolved into a dark, stagnant ring. I looked at the cup and saw my own reflection, distorted and tiny against the black liquid. Bianca didn't look at me when I walked in. She was staring at her reflection in the darkened screen of her iPad, checking the symmetry of her earrings. She was already armored for the evening, a dress of structured charcoal silk that looked less like clothing and more like a high-end, aerodynamic shell. It was a piece of wearable architecture designed to command a room without saying a word. "The PDF is on your phone, but I had Sarah print a hard copy," she said. Her voice had that specific, frictionless quality she saved for subordinates and, increasingly, for me. It was a voice designed for boardrooms and podcasts, modulated, authoritative, and entirely devoid of warmth. Read it twice. The talking points for the Sterling Gala have changed. We aren't leading with the philanthropic angle anymore. We're leading with the merger. The Vanguard Initiative is now a subsidiary narrative. I picked up the dossier. It wasn't a guest list. It was a script. I turned the pages, the heavy paper raspy against my calloused fingertips. Fingers that used to sketch blueprints for buildings that would never be built, now reduced to holding the manual for my own erasure. Section 1.1, Behavioral Constraints. Stance: maintain a 0.5-meter trailing distance during the entry walk. Interaction: if approached by the press, defer all queries regarding the Vanguard Initiative to Bianca. Use the phrase, "Bianca's vision for the integration has been the North Star of this project." Physicality: minimal contact. A hand on the small of the back is permissible only during the step-and-repeat photography. No laughing. A composed, supportive smile is the required aesthetic. Speech: avoid I statements. All contributions must be framed as we, referring to the firm, or she, referring to the CEO. I flipped through the pages. It went on for 14 sections. It dictated my drink choice: sparkling water with lime, no alcohol to ensure total cognitive alertness, and my conversational partners. I was to engage only with the spouses of the secondary board members, keeping them occupied while Bianca navigated the primary stakeholders. "You've demoted me," I said. The words felt heavy, like stones dropped into a deep well. Bianca finally looked at me, though she didn't see me. She was looking at the atom-shaped space in her life, checking to see if I fit the current design requirements. "Don't be dramatic. It's a high-stakes environment. The optics are sensitive. Last time, at the Met, you talked to the Times reporter for 10 minutes about your architecture thesis. It was distracting. It created a human interest tangent that diluted the focus on the series' beef funding announcement. People need to see a unified front centered on the brand, Adam, not a lecture on Bauhaus." "The brand," I repeated. The word tasted like copper. I thought we were the brand. The power couple. That's what the Vanity Fair headline called us. Two people, one vision. "That was 2 years ago," she said, her voice tightening with the practiced patience of a handler. "The market has shifted. People don't want power couples anymore. They want visionaries and their anchors. You're the anchor. You provide the stability, the domestic serenity that allows the visionary to operate. If the anchor starts trying to steer the ship, the whole thing runs aground." She stood up, the silk of her dress whispering against her skin. She walked over and adjusted my tie. She didn't look into my eyes. She looked at the knot. She tightened it until I felt the slight, rhythmic pulse of my carotid artery against the silk. It was a beautiful tie. Hermes, a gift from her for our anniversary, though I suspect Sarah had actually picked it out. Tonight is the most important night of my career, she said, her eyes finally meeting mine. They were beautiful, cold, and entirely devoid of curiosity. They were the eyes of shark that had learned to blink for the benefit of the cameras. I need you to be the perfect accessory. I need you to be silent, supportive, and invisible until called upon. Can you do that? Or do I need to call the car for one? It was a threat, but it was also an invitation to a suicide of the self. For 5 years, I had been the silent partner in the rise of Bianca Vance. I had edited her speeches, managed her anxieties, and played the part of the doting, intellectual husband. I was the human element that softened her sharp edges for the public. I was the one who remembered her mother's birthday, the one who made sure she ate during 30-hour work sprints. But lately, the edges had become so sharp they were cutting me out of the frame entirely. I'll follow the protocol, I said. My voice was a flat line. The car ride to the gala was a masterclass in atmospheric pressure. Bianca spent the entire 40 minutes on a silent conference call, her thumb dancing across the screen of a customized, matte black tablet I had helped her design 3 years ago. She didn't hold my hand. She didn't ask if I liked my suit. She was optimizing. The interior of the Maybach was a cocoon of leather and silence. I looked out the window at the city. The lights of New York blurred into long, neon streaks. I realized then that I was a ghost haunting my own life. I lived in a 5,000-square-foot penthouse I didn't own, ate food prepared by a chef I didn't hire, and wore clothes selected by a stylist who didn't know my name. I was a legacy system, functional perhaps, but no longer supported by the current operating system. "Are you ready?" she asked as the car slowed. The flashbulbs were already visible through the tinted glass, a rhythmic, lightning storm of social validation. "I'm ready," I said. "Remember," she whispered, her hand hovering near my arm but not touching it. "Don't speak unless prompted. And stay behind me. You're the frame, Adam. Don't try to be the picture." The door opened. The cold air hit me, smelling of exhaust and expensive perfume. The protocol had begun. The Sterling Foundation Gala was held at the Museum of Natural History, under the shadow of the great blue whale. It was a space designed to make humans feel small, an effect that Bianca utilized with predatory efficiency. As soon as we cleared the red carpet, where I performed my 0.5-meter trailing distance with surgical precision, the spatial symbolism of my new status became undeniable. In previous years, we had entered as a phalanx. We walked side by side, a singular unit of social gravity. Tonight, the moment we passed the heavy oak doors, the inner circle formed a perimeter around Bianca that did not include me. Marcus, her chief of staff, and 2 lead investors moved in, creating a physical barrier of tailored wool and expensive watches. I found myself walking near the catering staff, my shoulder brushing against a tray of champagne flutes. "Mr. Vance," a voice whispered. It was Sarah. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Your seating assignment has been updated." There was a logistical shuffle. She handed me a small card. In the past, I sat at table 1, to Bianca's right, opposite the guest of honor. I looked at the card. Table 42. Table 42 was located in the dark zone, the far reaches of the hall, where the lighting was dim and the acoustics were muffled by the heavy velvet curtains of the service entrance. It was the table for the necessary extras, the junior accountants, the distant cousins, and the placeholders. "Where's Bianca sitting?" I asked, though I already knew. "Table 1, Sarah said, looking at her tablet. "Between the CEO of Sterling and the new consultant." I looked toward the front of the room. There, at the heart of the light, was Bianca, and there, in my seat, was Julian Thorne. Julian was the successor. I had seen him in the trades, a 30-something venture capitalist with a jawline like a chisel and a reputation for disruptive empathy. He was what I had been 5 years ago, but with a more polished veneer and a more aggressive brand alignment. I watched them from the shadows of the back row. The spatial symbolism was devastating. Bianca was leaning toward him, her body language open, her laughter, the public laughter practiced and melodic, ringing out. He was holding her arm. He was whispering in her ear. He was doing exactly what I had done for half a decade. But it was the sensory detail that broke me. Julian was using a specialized tool, a sleek, titanium stylus that I had custom engineered for Bianca's birthday 2 years ago. It was weighted specifically for her hand, balanced for the way she took notes during high-pressure meetings. Seeing him use it was like seeing a stranger wear my skin. They shared a glance, a secret, lightning-fast look that suggested a level of intimacy I hadn't seen from her in years. It wasn't love. It was a shared frequency of ambition. I sat at table 42. My dinner companions were a silent pair of auditors who spent the entire meal checking their emails. The food arrived cold. I didn't mind. I wasn't hungry for the steak. I was hungry for the reality of the situation to finally, fully settle into my bones. I watched the inner circle from my vantage point near the basement stairs. From here, the Gala looked like a clockwork machine. I could see the gears turning, the way the PR people moved guests around Bianca like chess pieces, the way the photographers were directed to crop me out of the group shots. Every time I tried to catch her eye, her gaze skipped over me like a stone over a pond. I was no longer a person to her. I was a piece of the architecture, as inert as the marble pillars holding up the ceiling. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, yet it brought a strange, icy clarity. I wasn't just a partner who had been sidelined. I was a status currency that had been spent. Bianca had used my intellectual credibility to build her foundation, used my social grace to navigate the elite circles she once found daunting, and now that she had reached the summit, the ballast, me, was being tossed overboard to make the final ascent lighter. I stood up. No one at table 42 noticed. The auditors didn't even look up from their spreadsheets. I walked toward the center of the room, not to join the circle, but to cross it. I wanted to see if the protocol held. As I approached table 1, Marcus stepped into my path. He didn't say my name. He just held up a hand, a gentle but firm stop gesture. Adam, Bianca is in the middle of a high-level briefing with the Sterling board. It's probably best if you stick to the VIP lounge for the next hour. There's a quiet space there. Books. Good scotch. He was talking to me like I was a child or a golden retriever that had wandered onto the tennis court. I'm leaving, Marcus, I said. The car isn't scheduled until midnight, he replied, checking his watch. The departure window is strictly timed for the press exit. We need the supportive spouse shot for the morning edition. I don't care about the window, I said. And I don't care about the morning edition. I looked past him to Bianca. She was laughing at something Julian Thorne had said. She didn't look my way. Not once. She didn't have to. I was no longer on her radar because I was no longer an asset. I turned and walked out. Not through the red carpet. Not through the flashing lights. I walked out through the service entrance, past the crates of empty champagne bottles and the weary waiters having a smoke. I took a cab to a small, dusty apartment I kept in Brooklyn, a place I had used as an office, a place Bianca had called a sentimental waste of overhead. It was filled with old drafting tables, blueprints for libraries that would never be built, and the smell of cedar and old paper. It was real. It was mine. I turned off my phone. The catharsis didn't come in a scream or a wave of tears. It came in the form of a long, deep sleep. When I woke up 14 hours later, the sun was streaming through the unwashed windows, highlighting the dust motes in the air. I made a pot of tea, cheap, strong, and steaming hot. I drank it out of a chipped mug. It was the best thing I had tasted in years. I turn on my phone. The optics were in a state of emergency. 23:15, SMS from Sarah Adam. Where are you? The departure photo is in 10 minutes. Bianca is asking. You are out of position. 23:30, SMS from Sarah. The car is waiting. We're telling the press you felt unwell. Please confirm your location so we can sync the narrative. We need a home and bed photo for the socials. 0:15, SMS from Marcus. This is unprofessional, Adam. We had to have Julian escort her to the car. The tabloids are already asking questions about internal friction. We need a flu statement by 8 a.m. Get back to the penthouse now. 8 o'clock. Email from Bianca's subject. Performance breach. Adam, your disappearance last night was a calculated insult to the work I've put in. The Sterling merger is in a delicate cooling-off period. Your absence created a stability gap in the press coverage. I expect you back at the apartment by noon for a strategy session with the PR team. We need to fix this narrative. Do not make me come there. 10:30, SMS from Bianca Adam. Pick up. This isn't a game. You are an anchor, and right now, you're dragging the ship down. Think about the brand. Think about what we've built. I sat on my old wooden desk and scrolled through the messages. It was fascinating. Not once in dozens of texts and emails did anyone ask if I was okay. Not once did Bianca ask where I was because she was worried about my safety. Every communication was filtered through the lens of the brand. My disappearance wasn't a personal crisis. It was a performance breach. I wasn't a husband who had left. I was a stability gap. I opened my laptop and began to pull the logs. I had been the architect of our shared digital life. I had the passwords to the shared calendars, the home automation systems, the bank accounts, and the social media managers. I began to look at the math of our relationship. Over the last 365 days, Bianca and I had spent a total of 14 hours in private, non-optimized space, meaning time where no staff were present, no phones were out, and no work was being discussed. In that same period, we had appeared in 142 professional photographs together. The ratio was 10-1. 10 minutes of public performance for every 1 minute of private reality. I looked at the interaction logs on our home hub. For the last 6 months, 80% of Bianca's verbal commands to the house were privacy mode on, which triggered the sound-dampening fields in her wing of the penthouse. I was being ghosted while living in the same house. I didn't reply to her texts. I didn't call Marcus. Instead, I sent a single timestamp communication to Bianca's private server, the one she used for internal audits. 1,400 hours sent to Bianca Vance. The anchor has been cut. I am no longer interested in the stability of the ship. I will be at the penthouse at 6 p.m. to collect my personal effects. Please ensure the PR team is not present. This is not a narrative event. It is a private one. Her reply was instantaneous. It was the digital equivalent of a slap. 14:02, SMS from Bianca. Fine. 6 p.m. But if you think you're walking away with the Sterling shares, you're mistaken. You signed the prenup, Adam. You're a supporting character. Supporting characters don't get the leads payout. You're leaving with nothing. I didn't respond. She still thought this was about the math of money. She didn't realize I was looking at a different set of numbers. The penthouse was silent when I arrived at 6 p.m. The air smelled of expensive lilies and the metallic tang of the industrial-grade air purifiers. It was a sterile, beautiful tomb. Bianca was sitting in the living room, framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the park. She had a glass of wine in one hand and a legal tablet in the other. She didn't look like a wife. She looked like a queen waiting to negotiate a treaty with a rebellious province. "You're late," she said, without looking up. "The lawyers have already drafted a separation of assets. Since you've decided to opt out of your contractual obligations to the brand, your exit package has been significantly reduced. You'll get the Brooklyn apartment and a modest stipend for 2 years, provided the non-disclosure agreement remains intact. I didn't go to the bar. I didn't sit down. I stood in the center of the room, holding a small cardboard box. I'm not here for the shares, Bianca. I'm here for the audit. She finally looked up, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. What audit? We've already run the numbers, Adam. You're at a deficit. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It wasn't a legal document. It was a list of objective data points. In the last 5 years, I began, my voice calm and devoid of the friction she so hated, I have attended 412 events as your anchor. I have edited 89 speeches. I have managed 3 major PR crises involving your family. I have spent 2,190 nights in this house. And you were well compensated for it, she snapped. Look at the suit you're wearing. Look at the life you've had. You were a failed architect when I met you, Adam. I gave you a platform. That's the public math, I said. Here is the private audit. In those 5 years, you have asked me how my day was exactly 4 times. You have forgotten my birthday twice. You haven't seen my parents in 3 years, despite them living 40 miles away. And last night, at the Sterling Gala, you didn't look at me once. Not as a husband, not as a friend, not even as a human being. I was a 0.5 meter trailing distance. I was a composed, supportive smile. I was working, she exclaimed, standing up. The wine in her glass sloshed, a red stain blooming on the white silk rug. Everything I do is for the greater good of this company, which includes you. I'm building a legacy, Adam. That requires sacrifice. It requires a certain streamlined approach to personal life. You can't have a global brand and a picket fence marriage. I didn't want a picket fence marriage, I said. I wanted a marriage. I'm not a personal life, Bianca. I'm a person. There's a difference. You're being sentimental, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. It's beneath you. You knew the deal. We were a team. We were the ultimate power brand. We were going to own this city. No, I corrected. You were the brand. I was the commodity. I was the humanity you bought to make yourself look less like a machine. But the thing about commodities is that they eventually get replaced by cheaper, more optimized versions. Julian Thorne, for instance. I saw the way you looked at him last night. Or rather, the way you used him. He's a new anchor, isn't he? He's more on brand for the merger. Bianca froze. A flicker of something, guilt, annoyance, passed over her face. Julian is a strategic partner. He understands the mission in a way you've clearly stopped doing. He doesn't complain about optics. He understands that in this world, the performance is the reality. Then he's perfect for you, I said. He's 26, Bianca. He's eager. He's photogenic. And he doesn't have the historical friction of knowing who you were before you became a logo. He's the perfect upgrade, and you're welcome to him. But remember this, an anchor only works if it's attached to something solid. If you're just a shell, eventually you'll both just drift away. I walked toward the door, my small box of books and old photos tucked under my arm. It felt remarkably light. Wait, she said. Her voice had changed. The sharpness was gone, replaced by a calculated, soft-focused concern. It was her damage control voice. Adam, let's be reasonable. The press is already starting to sniff around. If we announce a split now, it'll tank the Sterling integration. The investors hate instability. Stay for 6 months. We'll do a conscious uncoupling series with Vogue. I'll double your equity. You can have the house in the Hamptons. We can make this work for everyone. She was offering a failed repair, a bribe disguised as a compromise. She couldn't conceive of a world where I wasn't for sale. I don't want a house, Bianca. I don't even want the Vogue spread. I'm done being an accessory. I opened the door. The hallway was brightly lit, a long, sterile corridor leading away from the life I had built. You'll be nothing without me, she called out, her voice rising in pitch, breaking for the first time. In 6 months, no one will remember your name. You'll just be the ex-husband. You're throwing away the only thing that makes you relevant. You're choosing obscurity over power. I stopped and looked back at her. She looked small against the backdrop of the city she worked so hard to conquer. The lights of Manhattan were twinkling behind her, millions of tiny sparks of ambition, and she was just one more. That's the beauty of it, I said. I don't want to be relevant. I want to be real. And for the first time in 5 years, I am. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a Google alert. Bianca Vance and Julian Thorne. A new power dynamic? Spotted at the Sterling afterparty. The photo showed Bianca laughing, her head tilted back, her hand on Julian's shoulder. It was dated 1 a.m., 3 hours after I had walked out of the museum. She had already recalibrated the narrative. The anchor had been replaced before the old one had even hit the bottom of the ocean. The system had already purged me. I walked out of the building and into the cool, chaotic noise of the street. I didn't call a car. I didn't check the optics. I just started walking toward the subway, a man with a small box and a life that finally belonged to him again. The catharsis wasn't an explosion. It was the silence that followed the end of a long, noisy performance. I stood on the subway platform, surrounded by strangers, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to be a supporting character or a frame for someone else's picture. I was just Adam. The train arrived, a roar of wind and steel. I stepped on, the doors closing behind me with a solid, final thud. I was moving. I was going somewhere. And for the first time in years, I was the one who was driving.
Thanks for listening.